What is up, guys? How are we doing? Welcome back to another episode of the Jedi in Exile. This one's a little bit of a sad one because it's the last one in the series. That is right.
It's hard times.
We
It's
have
emotional.
we have arrived at the Rise of Skywalker in our series of main saga movie reviews. Brian, how are you feeling about the whole situation, mate?
I feel words can't do it justice how I feel. It's emotional. Um, it's really the end of an era. You know, the saga will end.
I'm panicking, mate, because what we're going to do for content now?
I don't. No, I'm panicking. We've literally done everything.
No, but in all seriousness, guys, we have got tons of great content coming your way. So make sure that you hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of the upcoming content. And Brian, let's crack straight in, mate. We're gonna be talking about the Rise of Skywalker. Lay it on me.
Okay.
Strap in.
It's going to be a bumpy ride.
So, I've made more copious notes as I have done for each of the sequel trilogy films because they're the ones that I haven't watched as much for reasons that we all know. Now, Rise of Skywalker, I don't think it's a bad film. I actually quite like it. But I think, and we were kind of having this conversation on the trailer when we watched the trailer for it, that it's a good film almost for the same reasons that Revenge of the Sith was a good film because it ties everything up. You so much happens in it because you find out like the end of the story, the saga will end, you know, all the taglines. So I think this is quite a good film. There's things again we could say I think it follows the trend of the sequel trilogy where I don't think it necessarily flows too much, but I think the actual film itself is a good film. Um, I mean, there's some fundamental flaws in it for me, like, you know, the whole Palpatine returned. There's no like explanation, it's just dropped on
What
us.
do you mean you need an explanation about how somebody we saw die 3 movies ago is back?
Got thrown down about
What
400
do
floors.
you mean you need that explained? I don't know what you're talking about.
It gave me real bad Force Unleashed 2 vibes, where we constantly see Vader trying, well, we're not even sure, but trying to clone Starkiller, and the cloning process keeps going wrong. So it really reminded me of that. But yeah, it's almost like they just couldn't think of another bad guy. Like, you know, we've got such, you know, all these villains are just crap. Should we just bring back old Palps?
So so
But
it
yeah, so fundamentally, the film is a good film. I think it's let down because of the storyline that it had to go with. Obviously, with what had been in The Last Jedi and Force Awakens, but it's a decent film because it's the end of the saga.
yeah. So let's. What better place to start than the place you've already mentioned? Let's talk about Big Sheev, shall we?
Yeah.
So so he comes back. We get the
Yeah, so he's a clone, isn't he?
yeah,
That's the whole thing that it's the Sith cloning process. You know, it's not quite completed. That's
which
why he's on that weird like metal robot.
which is hinted at in the movies. In the on Exegol, we see kind of like the tubes and the tanks and everything, and we kind of
See like
see
Snoke and stuff, don't we?
yeah.
Yeah.
But is then explained in the novelization, I believe, in a little bit more depth. The whole clone situation. So not actually definitively confirmed in the movie, and needed the novelization to do so. Um,
I think that's what was frustrating. You can fill in the blanks sometimes as a, you know, a watcher of a film. You can kind of fill in the
you can
blanks,
piece
but
bits
this was,
together.
yeah, this was like a lot of filling in blanks.
Oh,
You're
it
like,
was just
so why was he in hiding this long? Like, why did he take from dying? Why did he take like another 30 years
well,
to
and
like
and then the
come
question
back?
and then the question around that is, where has he been and what's he been doing other than controlling Snoke for the other 2 movies? Because and longer, because we know that when Rey's parents got kidnapped, it was Palpatine that ordered for that to happen. So he must have been back at that point, and she's only a little girl at that point. And then when we meet her, she's what, like a teenager, late teens? I don't know how old she's supposed to be in
She's like early 20s, yeah.
in Force Awakens. So, you know, that is one of the issues. I actually didn't mind that he was back. I do think there's a couple of things here that Disney and the franchise need to be careful that they are making death less impactful within this franchise. Obviously, Maul didn't die. Spoiler alert for those that haven't seen Solo or Clone Wars. But so that happened. There's talks about them potentially bringing Mace Windu back in some way, shape, or form. And then obviously Palpatine coming back. So it's starting to really lay the foundations for death isn't necessarily a definitive state within Star Wars, which is a dangerous place to be, because it means that when characters do die, fundamentally it doesn't mean so much, because we just turn around and go, well, it'd be back in 2 movies. Don't worry about it. So that is definitely something that they need to be careful with, right? But other than that, I didn't mind it so much. It made sense because of the lineage thing with Rey and what the whole movie ended up kind of being about and climaxing to.
Yeah, I thought that was actually a cool part of the story, that Rey is, a Palpatine, yet she's so innately, good. She has the potential to turn to the dark side, but you never really get the impression with Rey that she's ever going to turn.
No, you feel like she's not in control, but you don't feel like she's not in control of her moral compass that is ultimately going to swing light side to dark side. Because obviously, we get the bit where she blows up the ship, right? And she does it using Force lightning.
Force lightning, which was obviously a bit of a foreshadowing, what's in her blood.
But obviously, that's not necessarily a massive kind of. That to me wasn't like, oh, she's going to turn. To me, that was just she's not in control of her abilities.
Which would make sense, because she's had like hardly any training, and the training she has had has been from Leia, who's didn't even make it to Jedi Knight and hasn't practiced the Force for like 30 years.
Yeah.
So that makes complete sense to me.
So I didn't mind the Palpatine piece. I feel like they made him.
Do you know what I don't like about it though? And I get that he's a clone, but the mere fact of like bringing him back makes a complete mockery of Vader. And we've had this conversation before
about his redemption,
about the story of Star Wars. Well, the first 6 films is the rise, fall, and redemption of Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah,
and it kind of makes that. To me, it makes a mockery of him killing the Emperor and like finally bringing balance to the Force. And I know there's arguments as to whether he is actually the chosen one, but in my eyes, he is. He's got no father. He is a son of the Force. The whole midichlorian count, all of that, he's the chosen one. And by bringing in Rey, and I am all the Jedi and all that, as much as it's a great scene, I'm like, this is really giving off that she's the chosen one vibes. And how her story ends up, that she's not a Jedi, she's not a Sith, she's like almost like Ahsoka a little bit, with like the grey Jedi area.
My criticism of Palpatine, I get what you're saying, I do understand that. I think the fact that he's a clone kind of eases that with me a little bit, because he did ultimately.
Died, though, like.
But my issue with him was that he became slightly OP when he's for those that don't understand the term OP, overpowered. From the fact that he's chilling on his throne, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm not just going to Force lightning you. I'm going to shoot mad Force lightning up in the sky that's going to attack all of the ships, and it was just like.
Yeah, the cloning process isn't complete that he can walk on his own, but he can shoot lightning through an entire planet.
So to me, that was a little bit.
I get that Exegol might be a very powerful place, because obviously it's like the seat of the Sith, which I've always thought was Korriban, but whatever. What do I know from reading over 100 novels in the EU?
I was gonna say it was until Disney said no. One of the things that I really enjoyed about this movie and about the Exegol piece is we got to explore the Kylo Ray, like the dyad in the Force, and we got the redemption of Ben Solo.
Yeah, and Kylo Ren's mask. Can we just make a comment on that? Really cool. The fact that it's like been pieced together.
They put it back together.
Yeah, love it. I think it makes him look way cooler. I bet the babes are loving it. He's a pussy magnet, I reckon.
I found like a bunch of these scenes really confusing again because, like you said, with the whole like not gelling, not working together. I know we got some of the weird dyad stuff in Last Jedi, but it wasn't really explained, and then it continued to not be explained in this movie fully. They just turned around and went, "Oh, they're a dyad in the Force." Like that explains it. Like anyone knows what that really means, and like that explains anything at all. But I mean, I did think this was cool. It don't know if some of this stuff existed purely to drive the plot, because it was like, oh, she's on his ship. How are we gonna work out? Like, how are we gonna let him know that she's on his ship? Oh, we'll have it so that he like can see where she is. Like, seemed a bit weird, but I did think it was a cool concept that this was, like we talked about in our previous review for The Last Jedi. This whole, like, it was really trying to drive home that Kylo was the dark side and Rey was the light side, and then obviously we got the redemption, so it was kind of like the light one out in the end. But also, I feel like this brings more weight to your argument about these potentially being essentially like reincarnations of the family from Mortis.
Yeah, the children of the Force.
Yeah. So
Yeah, and that's the way that I can get my head around how they are together, and they are family. So yeah, I don't know. I really struggle with the whole dyad thing, and the whole that's the reason why they can like save each other's lives and do the force healing and all of this stuff.
I don't know if that's why they can do the Force healing. I feel like that is because obviously like Grogu can do it in Mandalorian
Yeah.
and stuff. So I think
That's
that is
how it was. That's how it was explained to begin with until we had the Grogu.
um, but I think the concept of kind of the balance of the Force and light side, dark side, and then when they went to face off against Palpatine, the fact that Palpatine was so strong that the balance was shifted by getting the redemption of Ben Solo. Obviously, we got the Harrison Ford flashback when they're
Yeah, I liked that it was Han that basically turned him
that
back.
brought him
I
back.
liked that
Yeah,
it wasn't Leia. It wasn't who you thought it would be. It was scoundrel.
and also that
You know.
it wasn't this whole, because they kept teasing, oh, Ray will turn him. Ray will turn him. He loves Ray, even though he's never really like met her or anything. But he loves Ray, so he'll turn for her. And it wasn't. It was genuinely. It was Han, which was great. We got the cool scene on the Death Star wreckage, like the fight and stuff with that. But that
The fight though is just terrible. We've gone from Anakin and Obi-Wan, one of the greatest. Forget like Star Wars fights, one of the greatest sword fights in cinema history, and then we've got these two basically in slow motion. I hate the fights of the sequel trilogy, and the fact that Kylo loses again. I've had this argument before. How can, and I'm going to call him a Sith. How can a Sith Lord be bettered by a girl who's had like 3 months training? And I get she's a Palpatine, I get she's powerful, but it's like raw ability. He should be absolutely battering her. It should be like Yoda against 9-year-old Anakin. Like that's the scale of this fight. It infuriates me that throughout every film, Kylo doesn't. He only barely beats Finn. I mean, even Finn gives him a good go, and I'm like,
do you know what
you want to be creating Kylo as like this really powerful guy, and the start of this film, he's killing a load of people on the way to finding the Wayfinder, and you're like, yeah, he's really powerful. Half an hour later, he's fighting Rey, and he gets fucking stabbed in the stomach. Like, it just again, it's like the film just makes a mockery of the Jedi and the Sith. It's like I pick up a lightsaber, I can be a Jedi in 3 months. Like that's not how the Force works.
Were you not on the Jedi fast track management course, mate?
Oh yeah, I did pay for a 5-day intensive
Yeah,
course.
exactly. No, I get what you're saying. For me though, it was the actual fight itself. Okay, not so great, but the setting of it, I really enjoyed. The whole like waves crashing around them, kind of all of that kind of stuff. It does lead me on really nicely to one of my big gripes in the movie,
It's the same with me because I was going to mention it after this. Go on.
which is the massive plot point of, oh, we need to find the other Sith Wayfinder. Where is it? It's on the Death Star. How do we find it? Oh, this dagger is a map. Rock up on a planet. Look at the wreckage of the Death Star. Oh, we just so happen to be standing in the perfect place for this to line up.
Yeah,
Amazing.
I've literally got a note to say the dagger knife map is so ironic. Like
it's
it's the perfect bit of the wreckage. Like
that
what?
to me is ridiculous, and
Yeah.
it's farcical, I think, is the only way to describe it. Like, they've gone, we need a way of doing this. What can we do? And they've gone.
To begin with, you're like, oh, because it's bringing the bits from Return of the Jedi back into this film, so it's like full circle. But they've just done it the completely wrong way.
Yeah, for me though, all they needed to do was have she found like some note or something that basically said there was a secret room within the throne room of the Death Star.
The Force or something. That's the way I look at it. It's like the Jedi, because that's one of my big gripes with Palpatine. If he's so powerful and pulling the strings, Luke would sense the dark side getting stronger, but he's only sensed the dark side getting stronger like 25 years later when Kylo has a bad dream. Like, that's when he senses like Snoke has turned him and blah blah blah. And forgetting about all of that, if Palpatine's so strong, Luke would have sensed it. And I kind of feel like they could have done this with Rey, where she senses the Wayfinder, and you're almost like it's the dark side in her that she's being pulled to the dark side, that she can sense all of this. So I think they just played that completely wrong. The whole dagger and the whole, oh, what has this done? You know, I don't want to use it. I don't even want to touch it. You're holding a lightsaber that killed like hundreds of Jedi in the temple.
The Youngling Slayer 3000.
Yeah, I'm like, come on. That's the the lightsaber that Anakin used to slaughter probably thousands of Jedi.
I really wanted the dagger. So there were promo images, right, that had the like parts of the trailer and everything that had the dagger in it. There were a bunch of rumors floating about that it was going to be the dagger of Mortis, which again goes back to the like family of the Force piece. And I really wanted it to be something to do with that. And that was because that would have then made sense. That was like she could have used that, and that gave her, I don't know, like a Force vision, like she got when she picked up the lightsaber in Maz's castle. Like something like that would have made much more sense than essentially like an old school way of navigating that actually makes no sense because you have to be standing in the right place. And also, we've got to remember this wreckage has been in the sea for however long. Like, it would have moved around and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think big hole there, and something that needs to be.
You know what I think about these films though, and I was going to end our talk on the sequels with this point. I think, and almost how the prequel trilogy has gone, where there was a lot of hate to begin with, and now people like of our generation and more, really love them. And I think a lot of that has to do with the Clone Wars. So I think the holes have been filled in. I think the sequel trilogy, there are so many holes in this, where even if we go back about 10 minutes ago, we said how the audience does so much guessing and things aren't really hinted. You have to kind of just piece it together yourself. I think in 20 or 30 years' time, as we find out more and there's more TV series and films and stuff, we will know more. And so I think we will appreciate these films more.
Oh.
But at the moment, it seems like they've just been terribly written and terribly, I'm not going to say terribly made, but they've been terribly written and not pieced together.
Yeah.
Not flow. We've said that all the three films are very disjointed. I think in later years, we will appreciate these films a bit more because the plot holes will have been revealed and filled.
Massively. And Resistance started that, the animated series.
Yeah.
Obviously, we get a little bit of that pieced together through Mando and Book of Boba Fett and all of that kind of stuff as well. But I think we're waiting for that next one big, likely to be animated show that they can churn out a 20 episode season to fill in some more of these
I
gaps.
think this era, it just isn't sexy enough for Disney at the moment. I think because there's so much hate for the sequels, I don't think they really want to risk
It's not
the profile
marketable.
of
It's
Disney.
not marketable.
No, absolutely. Like they risked it with the whole Solo movie, and that's why they went that because that flopped. They had to go more the TV series route, and they realized people didn't really care, not about that era, but about that kind of side storyline. We wanted more of Jedi stuff, of Jedi hunters, Inquisitors. You know, we wanted more about the rogue Jedi. Just there's so much that we wanted, and at the moment, fans don't want sequel trilogy stuff. I mean, that's me talking, but I think it's my opinion that I don't think the fans do want that.
I would take it personally. I'd take it. I'd watch it. But I'd watch pretty much anything they put out. Because I'm a loser. But no, in all seriousness though, like I would relish them putting stuff out that does fill these blanks in, and I feel like they've shown through the absolute love of Clone Wars, the fact that they pulled Clone Wars back for a final season, and then had the Bad Batch spin-off from it as well, that the fans, there is a demand for animation. I don't know how well Resistance went down. I'll be honest, it had been out for ages before I went and watched it because I really struggled with the first couple of episodes. I had to go back and start again. And a lot of people that have watched it have said to me they watched the first 2 episodes and gave up, and I said give it 5 episodes, and because that's the point for me that it changed. So I would watch it, but we can only wait and see what they put out. We've done the usual thing of getting slightly off topic, but it is relevant. But let's swing back.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there was a few poignant moments in this film, and actually 2 of them come from 3PO, who's like an emotionless, robot, pardon the pun, throughout all of the movies. But the first line, the line that gets me more than, for those looking on YouTube, you can see the still from this where the second one he says is just taking one last look at my friends. And I'm like, you don't even know these guys, basically. Like, he says to friends, it's none of the OGs. The line that gets me is when he's saying bye to R2, where he says, "Oh, you've been a real friend to me, the best friend." And I'm like, oh, that's them separating, like potentially never seeing each other again. And they're the only characters that have been in all 9 of the Skywalker Saga films. And so, yeah, throughout all the turmoil they've been through and all the times they thought where it might be over, this is the time where they genuinely thought, right, this is the end. Like, the whole final order. This is it. And so, yeah, that was a couple of really poignant moments.
I think that I agree with you, but the taking a look at my friends, I get what you're saying about it's not any of the OGs, but obviously he's been a part of the Resistance for however long, and Poe's been around for long old time and all of that kind of stuff, and there's been a few years, isn't there, between when he's first met everybody and now, so they are,
He must be friends with him because he's quoting the odds at him like he used to do with Han. He
Exactly.
quotes the odds at Poe, doesn't he?
But that really, watching the trailer, that made me quite emotional. And then watching it in the movie, it made me quite emotional, which, like you said, is really impressive considering it's supposed to be an emotionless robot that's essentially saying it. And
I find it mental that he was built by Darth Vader.
well, so but this is one thing I'm going to say. So it's another kind of nitpicky piece, and it's not. There's going to be people in the comments who are immediately going to go mad at me about this. But do you not find it weird that they're like, oh, he was built by a slave boy on Tatooine, but he programmed him to know some ancient forgotten Sith language?
Yeah,
Like,
I don't know. I go along the lines of like he's basically got a black market like Intel processor chip, that you put into a laptop that you're like, oh, this has got 6 million languages loaded on it, and you're like, oh wow, cool. I wonder if it's got the ancient Sith language that's forbidden to be spoken. Like, he's not going to have looked at that. He's 9 years old. He's like, can it speak Basic? Can it speak Barchi? That's it.
But that did make me laugh when people were saying about that, and it's got some truth to it. And don't get me wrong, it is fairly easily explained away, like you said. He's going to have used second-hand parts and all of that kind of stuff. But it is just a little bit funny to kind of go, oh yeah, 9-year-old boys programmed him with a like some ancient Sith forgotten language. But no, I thought that as a movie, like you said, this was the round off. And I genuinely thought that this might be the end for 3PO at this point.
Yeah, and I think one thing I think this film actually did really well was how it played Finn. I felt like the other two films didn't really quite get Finn right. They played him as this hero come coward. So Force Awakens, he's left the First Order. He's still struggling with his emotions about that. But he then finds friends in Poe and Rey, and helps them out. Constantly, worried about Rey, trying to find her. Last Jedi, he then becomes a coward and he's trying to escape. Then he's the hero again, trying to find the hacker. This film gets him right. That he is somebody that has been raised by the First Order, hates what they stood for and what they stand for now, and is doing everything in his power to get rid of them. And he's a true leader in this film, and I think that's how they should have played Finn, kind of all the way through.
Well, essentially,
they've flip flopped his character too much.
Essentially, at the end, when Leia's dead, him and Poe are they're the top dogs. They're the top dogs of the entire Resistance. Which, yeah, I agree with you. I feel like that was where he was pitched perfectly. That's the position that he kind of needed to be.
Oh, like at the end, he was sacrificing himself. He thought he was sacrificing himself to destroy the destroyer they were on.
Yeah,
and obviously I know the Falcon comes and picks him up, etc. But yeah, he was willing to sacrifice himself to get rid of the First Order, to stop more kids being taken like he was.
So that kind of whole... So I know it's not actually the final scenes in the movie, because we get stuff afterwards. We get the kind of the fallout of everything. But let's go on and talk about the kind of... Because you've just talked about the whole kind of piece where he's on the
and this is the bit in the only time I think in the sequel films where I get really fired up, when Poe's like, there's too many of them, and then Lando's voice just comes in, but there are more of us, Poe. And he like flicks the X-wing round, fucking goes round a Star Destroyer, and is this image, and you're just like, holy crap.
So this for me was just incredible. So obviously Lando's back. He's flying the Falcon.
Yeah.
You've got Wedge in the gunner, like in the gunner seat with him, which is just like, here we are, OG rebellion, like living the dream.
Like old times.
But the thing that was absolutely class about this, and I'm gonna kind of just look at the image that's there. This is just a one cut, and it's cut off some of the images, but this was class because without going into tons of detail, and they are little throwaway details that were here, we get so many kind of tie-ins, throwbacks, whatever you want to call it. So the Ghost is in this image somewhere, which is the ship from Rebels. I can't think of the name of the ship, but the platform that the majority of the Resistance series is set on is in this picture somewhere. There are a bunch of old school like Corellian class corvettes in there, which is like what the Tantive was. There's just so many kind of tie-ins and references and little details for real kind of hardcore Star Wars fans to get excited about. But this was what genuinely, the more you spot and the more tie-ins that they kind of pull into this, the more you go, oh my god, this was the climax of 9 movies, but not just 9 movies. All of the tie-ins, like all of the books, the TV series, the comics, like everything. This was all of it coming to like one final scene.
Yeah, and I think this scene, and especially the scene straight after this, sum up Star Wars for me. So the scene after this is the general who the general of the First Order, who is saying like, well, they've not got a navy. How have they amassed this amount of ships? And one of his lieutenants then goes, it's not a navy, it's just
People. Yeah.
And I think the story of Star Wars is that, you know, the underdog will win if you've got enough resolve and enough, you know, spirit behind you. The underdog can take on, you know, the big, you know, empire. And I think that's the motto of Star Wars. That's the whole rebellion against the Empire. It's the Jedi. You know, it's the nice guys can win. And yeah, that line just really struck me when I was watching it again. Like the whole, it's just people, and that for me just is the story of Star Wars.
I'm not gonna disagree with you, mate. I think that's summed up really nicely. One thing that I kind of want to touch on, and then I guess potentially we can. Oh, 2 things. One good thing, one slightly negative thing, and then we'll go from there. So, after this scene, we get 2. I'm gonna say 2 more main kind of pieces, right? So straight after this, we get the guys back on back at base after all of this, and one thing that really lifted this movie for me, and again, it was all about closing out, bringing everything full circle, is one of the main gripes from A New Hope is that the people behind the guys blowing up the Death Star and winning were Luke, Han, and Chewie. And Luke and Han, they get their medals, they're happy days. Chewie's just chilling there like, what? The absolute discrimination against the Wookiees. And that gets rectified with this really nice scene when they're all celebrating and everything, and Maz comes over and's like, I've got something for you, and gives him his medal. And for me, again, it was genuinely quite emotional to be like, it takes you back to the beginning.
For Chewie, it's everyone's gone, isn't it, from like the original films? Everyone who he was kind of close to, except Lando, is gone. You know, his best friend Han has died. You know, he's watched his wife now die, his son turn to the dark side, and now is dead. Luke's gone. Like, yeah, and that obviously is a symbol of like the old days, that medal. So yeah, no, that was another poignant moment.
I really enjoyed that. I thought that was a really nice touch, something that could have easily been cut from the movie when they were looking at running time and kind of and pacing levels. That's something that's very easily cut out because it doesn't actually do anything to the story, but was a huge kind of. I don't even think you need to be a massive Star Wars fan, because I think that you would kind of make the connection pretty easily. And yeah, that was great for me. I guess the only thing after that, the next scene is kind of the scene on Tatooine, right? Which is the the piece that is, people either love it or they hate it. Is the scene on Tatooine with Rey, and she buries Luke and Leia's lightsabers together, which I think is actually quite nice, quite heartfelt, that she's kind of saying these are done, and it's kind of the end of an era. It is genuinely that kind of closure that you get, that's done with now, and we'll move on to the next chapter, which to me was then slightly contradicted. And this is I don't have an issue with the whole her taking the Skywalker name, which I know is a big thing for some people, right? Don't have an issue with that. The issue that I have is that comes 10 seconds after the message for me was, that's the end of the story. That's us closing this off now. That is, everything.
Skywalkers are over.
Yeah, everything that came before, the Skywalker Saga, the 9 movies and stuff, we are done. And then she's like, "I am Rey Skywalker."
Yeah, it's almost like the putting the lightsabers down is like let the past die.
Yeah, and then this to literally be within the same scene, like literally 5-10 seconds later, whatever it is. I'm probably miles out on
10
time.
seconds to answer that bird. The bird with the camel must have been like, did she not hear me?
But that is the issue I have with this, not her taking the Skywalker name, which some people have an issue with because they're like, "Oh, you're a Palpatine. Being a Jedi doesn't just make you a Skywalker." So I'm not precious over the Skywalker name and bothered about that piece. And I want to make that really clear. It's more just the way it's been dealt with, where it's like let's draw the line under it, and then she's like 5 seconds later, "Well, actually, I'll be a Skywalker now, and I'll carry the story on." Was a bit. I feel like they could have just taken her as Rey, and she didn't need that, and that would have been a perfect opportunity to then go, Skywalker Saga done, 9 movies. If we want to do anything in the future, we've got this great character that we can take away and do something with. That's my opinion on it. Other people absolutely loved the fact that that's what she did, so I get it. And as I said, not precious over the Skywalker name. Just don't think that bit was like, the messages are very contradicting, and the fact that they literally happen one immediately after the other. That was my big issue with that.
Yeah, see, I got why she buried the lightsabers at Luke's, obviously Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru's moisture farm. But at the same time, I was a bit like, Leia has like no connection to these. I know they are her, step uncle and aunt, but
I guess it's
I know
ancestral
it's
home,
the start of the story, isn't it? Without Luke coming from there, he wouldn't have like.
but also Anakin, right?
You are.
Also Anakin, being from
I mean, also Anakin.
Well, Anakin being from Tatooine, and
It's his home planet, but I mean, he didn't ever live in the moisture farm, did he? Like,
no, but I don't think we need to get necessarily caught up on the exact but
no. I kind of felt like I get that the two lightsabers being buried together, and it's not like they could go to Alderaan because, spoiler alert, it's been destroyed. But
too soon.
Yeah, it was just something I remember watching it, thinking like,
feels a bit weird. Yeah,
but yeah. I mean, it wasn't a huge thing for me. I think what my gripe, and probably a good time to move on now to the ending of the film. One of my main gripes was the whole "I'm all the Jedi" and that whole segment, the whole scene. And this is where TikTok has enhanced one bit of the scene for me and ruined another scene. So I'm going to talk about the one it's ruined first of all. And actually, I say ruined, but it's kind of a guilty pleasure. It makes me laugh. So when Ben lands on Exegol, to run and like rescue Rey, someone made a TikTok of him running and the song.
Is it "I Need a Hero"? Is it "I Need a Hero"?
I'm holding up for a hero to the end.
Banger by Bonnie Tyler.
Yeah, absolutely. But it gives me real bad memories of Shrek 2, where it's played with Jennifer Saunders sings it, and Shrek's obviously trying to go save Fiona. And so for me, it's kind of ruined that scene. Whenever I watch it, it's supposed to be obviously a serious scene, and I love him fighting the Knights of Ren. Like, I think that's absolutely brilliant. But then the TikTok moving on, the one which I think has made the scene better, so there was bits in the trailer, wasn't there, where you had Rey facing up to a hooded figure, and they kind of hinted there was a couple of Jedi. I can't remember the exact Jedi who said obviously said their lines, and there's so many Jedi that do say their lines. What I find a little bit odd is that they've literally just focused on like the 20 years of us watching Star Wars. They could have done some other random voices, because they constantly talk about 1,000 generations
Well,
flow through you. The
let's
Jedi Knights are 1,000 generations old.
let's let's
Like,
let's so off the top of my head, some of the people that we hear Ahsoka, Mace.
yeah,
I think we hear. Do we hear Ayla Sakura? I think.
yeah, it's Ayla Secura. I feel like Shakti as well.
Yeah, and then you get
You've got, like,
Anakin.
Anakin,
You get
Obi-Wan.
you get both Obi-Wans,
Yeah,
Yoda,
yeah,
and Luke and Leia. I think you hear.
yeah. You definitely get Luke.
I thought you
I
heard
assume we
Leia,
do get Leia.
but I could be wrong. So yeah, like all of those have been people who have essentially featured in the Skywalker saga, and you're right. They're if
Yeah, and it's
she
like
is
Anakin given it a whole line of like, bring balance to the Force like I did. Well, the story says you didn't bring balance to the Force because here we are. You know, again trying to kill a Palpatine. Like, you didn't bring balance. But yeah, I mean, so the scene, the TikTok that we felt and we thought it was amazing. We reacted to it on TikTok. Thought it was brilliant. Is when she's given it the whole "I am all the Jedi" and given the the double the X, forcing the lightning back at Palpatine. They've actually edited it so there's the Force ghosts standing behind Rey, all there like pushing out with the Force and all like urging her on. Um, and it just seemed like absolutely, well, it just seemed awesome. The scene is really cool anyway, don't get me wrong. Like,
I'm not gonna lie,
it's awesome.
I genuinely feel like if Disney pull a George Lucas, where in 10 years' time they're like, fuck it, let's do like some digital remaster on them, that is what they will do. They'll do exactly that and essentially copy that concept and
Which
put
they
it in.
couldn't do because it's unless they'd trained, none of them could come back as Force ghosts except Luke. We obviously know that Leia did. How she's come back as a Force ghost is completely beyond me because it's supposed to be a really difficult thing to do. Again, she's not trained in the Force for the last 30 years, yet she can come back as a Force ghost. So, in my eyes, the only people who can come back as ghosts are Qui Gon, who then passes the teachings on to Yoda. Qui Gon's another voice, by the way.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so you got Qui Gon. He then teaches it to Yoda, who teaches it to Obi Wan, who
Teaches it to Luke.
we're assuming teaches it to Luke. Those are the four, in my eyes, that can come back as Force ghosts. So even just those four, I'd be happy with that though, because it's almost like the trilogy going full
Full
circle.
circle.
You've got Qui Gon from Episode One, who is the one who senses, the abilities of Anakin and starts this whole fucking saga in motion.
Well, you'd have Anakin as well, right? Because he obviously
Yeah, yeah, you would have Anakin. Yeah,
appears at
sorry,
the
yeah,
end,
you would have
appears at the
Anakin
end
as
of
well.
Return of the Jedi. But
Yeah, of
I
course.
I thought that was a really cool edit. I kind of wish they had done something similar to the actual movie. It is an awesome scene anyway. We're not trying to take anything away from the actual scene, but I do think that was a really cool way to.
What I actually did like though about the whole, because people were like, well, how can all the Sith be in Palpatine or all the Jedi be in Rey? And this for me was something that came from the Darth Bane books. So the end of the Darth Bane books, and I don't want to ruin it too much, but kind of Bane goes for a ritual, doesn't he? Where he thinks that if he's defeated, he can pass his spirit into the nearest human life form,
Yeah.
which he thinks might be his apprentice. If they have this big duel, they face off. If he's struck down, he can like almost go into like a ritual beforehand and then go into someone else's body. And I kind of felt like that was a bit of a nod to that. Because even though when Disney took over, although Darth Bane himself is canon,
The
the three
story,
books
yeah.
aren't. So it completely, poo-pooed all that. But it was like almost like a bit of a subtle nod that like,
But
we see you, expanded universe fans, and
and
we hear you.
I think that this is definitely something that Disney need to. Again, we're getting slightly off topic, but let's just touch on
It's,
it
it's going to
really
be stuff
quickly.
they come back to, isn't it?
Yeah, I feel like this is definitely where. Okay, I'm not asking them to go out there and pick an EU book and go right. Let's just turn that into a movie or make it canon, but take some inspiration from some really great stories that are out there. There's some absolute shit out there in the EU, like some really bad stuff in the EU. But there's also some absolutely incredible stuff. So go out there and pick the good stuff and use it. You don't have to make it the same. And when we did the interview with my dad, the episode of that is on the channel for those
Wait,
that haven't seen
hang on
it.
to that.
Yeah. um, when we did the interview with my dad, he kind of touched on it, where he said that in the EU books, Han and Leia had kids, and Luke and Mara Jade, his wife, had kids, and Han and Leia's son turned to the dark side, and it was similar, and it was okay, different names, different circumstances, and different ways that it played out, but they still took that inspiration, and I think that's definitely the way that I think in that way you please the EU fans by, like you said, it's that nod of we see you, we know you're there, we're not just going to ignore you, but you also create something new that everybody can enjoy.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, and listen, I think to sum up this film, like I said, about 10 minutes ago, I think that these films are very much like the prequels, where the prequels were hated on because people were used to the original trilogy and had grown to love those characters. But the prequels now are absolutely loved. The sequels, I think, will be like that. So in 20 years' time, people like my son, who enjoys Star Wars, enjoys watching all the Star Wars films, don't get me wrong, but because he won't know the hate that the sequel trilogy gets, he will be one of those in 20 years' time remembering when, he used to watch the sequel trilogy.
So just a quick point on that. You and I discussed this, and I gave you my theory, I reckon, month or so ago, about why the prequels now get so much love. And Ewan McGregor actually came out this week in an interview and pretty much summed up my theory, which is that when the prequels came out, I think my dad even said this, when the prequels came out, the people that were going to see the prequels were people who had grown up on the original trilogy, and the original trilogy was what they loved, and they were the adults. And when box offices or movies do well at the box office, which is ultimately how a movie is judged on its success or not, and critics who have to be in a position and they've worked their way there will have been people that watched the original trilogy. So of course there was backlash to the prequels because it was different and it was new. And now there's starting to be that prequel love because people like us, who at the time that the prequels came out and we loved them then, we weren't old enough to be able to go out and vote with our wallets. We weren't able to go out and buy merchandise and review movies online and kind of do all of the things that fans do to make their voices heard. And you've got something very similar now, I think, which is that our initial reaction to the sequels, and I think we've made some really valid points over the past 3 reviews, but our reaction to the sequels was we're not massive fans of them in general. There are some good things in there because we've tried to be, see it from different angles, but on a whole, we're not massive fans of them because it's changed from the original trilogy and the prequels, which is what we grew up on. Like you've said, in 10, 20 years' time, the people like your son who don't know about any of that and will just grow up and enjoy watching it for what it is, which is a movie to escape into for 2 hours, are going to be old enough to then go out and buy merchandise, write reviews online, and do all of those things that, again, make their voices heard. So I would not be surprised, like you've said, if in 15, 20 years' time there is a massive revival of all of the sequel stuff in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I think the sequels was let down. So the original trilogy, obviously George Lucas wrote, and then he executive produced, so he was constantly there.
He was involved. He was on set every day. Yeah. He was doing all of that stuff.
George Lucas then obviously wrote and directed the prequel trilogy. So it's one man, one vision. Disney didn't get that right with the whole J.J. Abrams is going to come back, but he's not going to write it. He's going to direct the first one, and then he's going to write The Rise of Skywalker.
And then you've got Ryan Johnson in the middle.
Yeah, we'll have Ryan Johnson in the middle. And I think Disney have actually kind of got it right with what they're doing with the TV series, is that even though there's loads of different directors, this is Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau who have like got this universe that they've. I mean, I'd love to see. They've probably got like a huge like mind map almost on like a whiteboard somewhere where everything fits in together. It's almost like the Marvel films where all the films come and it's one big story, even though you don't realize it until the end. And in this case, it's two men who have got a vision, and everything ties into that. I think the sequels struggled because they didn't have that one person who was like, "This is the story. I'm going to oversee this." That's that. They didn't have that.
And I think that Dave Filoni, we joke about him being the new Messiah, like, and all of that kind of stuff. But on a genuinely serious note, like, he was on Clone Wars when George was still involved and around and owned the franchise, and George Lucas essentially, like, kind of metaphorically handed him the reins of. I'm sure that there's an interview out there somewhere, and unless I've imagined it, I'm sure that I've watched an interview where George Lucas essentially jokes that Dave Filoni knows more about Star Wars than George Lucas knows about Star Wars. So that, for me, I agree with you massively, is when you look at the way that they're tying in The Mandalorian, the Book of Boba Fett, and then the Clone Wars with Rebels, and Rebels and the Clone Wars in with Mandalorian, and making this kind of whole world that meshes and pulls from each other without doing it in kind of like a novelty cameo kind of way. It's actually done in quite a thought out way. That is what the sequels were missing. The sequels were missing this one overarching power, this overseeing kind of hand to go, no, that's not a good direction, or yes, that makes sense. But they needed to know where they were going to go with episode 9 when they were writing and filming episode 7, in order to leave the kind of the breadcrumbs and the bits that maybe left some question marks after episode 7, but after you've watched episode 9 you go, oh, that makes sense now.
Yeah.
And that's what it was missing, which is why I totally agree.
Any trilogy needs that. Any film series, you need to have one person, like an author. The Harry Potter books, if they'd had a different writer for each book, then you'd never have the storyline that you've got now. It would never be able to link back. So, yeah, for me, that's the fundamental flaw. Now, scoring wise, so we give everything a score out of 10. So, this is going to be our last score out of 10 for the Skywalker Saga. I'm going to ask you first, Matthew. I normally go first with the whole score. What would you give this out of 10?
I'm really torn, head and heart,
Oh,
head
you're
and heart
always
on
Natalie
this.
Imbruglia.
I know, but I genuinely am on this one, head and heart wise. I feel like heart is telling give it big, because it was the end. It was the. I remember coming out the cinema to this. You text, and we saw it separately because we don't live in the same place, and so we didn't have the luxury of going to see it together. And you text me after I got out of the cinema, and I said to you, my initial reaction after watching was, it is the best movie of the entire saga, and you were shocked at me saying that. I feel like that was definitely like kind of a little bit overcome with emotion and getting invested in everything and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm not gonna give it a 10, and I'm not going out there and saying it's the best movie. I think I'm gonna go with an 8 on this one, which is, for me, I think that's a good balance between. This is my favorite of the sequel movies, for sure. I feel like if it hadn't been backed into a corner by 7 and 8, it would have ended up being a better movie. There are a few flaws that we've discussed, like the silly thing with the dagger and stuff like that. I do get that, but I feel like I still watch the movie, and when I'm watching the movie, I don't go, oh, isn't it convenient that they're standing in the right place for that, because I'm invested in what's actually going on. It's only when you sit back afterwards and look at it all that's what starts to come to mind. So yeah, I'm gonna stand with it. I'm gonna say it with chest. 8.
Okay. I am going with a 6, and I was going to give it a 5, but I feel like it's a bit better than a 5. I think it's a decent film with, yeah, I think the foundation of 7 and 8 has just let it down. It's good because it's the end of the series, so you find out loads and there's some real great action, but for the reasons above, yeah, I'm giving it a 6.
It's fair enough, mate. I'm not going to argue with you. Like, you know, you're more than entitled to your opinion. Your opinion might be wrong, but you're more than entitled to your opinion. Let us know down in the comments below, guys, what you all thought of this movie, how you thought it stacked up against all of the other movies in the saga, including Solo and Rogue One. And obviously, if you've not seen the other review videos, they are all nice and conveniently in a nice little playlist. I will do a little link up the top there for you for the start of the playlist. So go give them a watch and let us know what you think about all of the movies that we have reviewed so far. And like I said, this is the end of this series, but do not worry because we will have tons more content coming your way. And obviously, Kenobi coming out real soon, a couple of weeks away. So tons of content coming out off the back of that, as well as lots of other exciting things that we've got in the pipeline. So make sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of that. And all that is left to say, guys, is we will see you all real soon in the next one.
Force be with you, everyone.